Hi, everybody. I'm an alcoholic, and my name is not important, but you can call me Roy. And I am truly grateful to be sober today. And family members in about four other countries are pretty grateful as well that I am sober today because my drinking caused a lot of havoc for them. Um, it's funny how I met Glenn because when my sober date is 22nd April 1990. I've been in AA much longer than that. But when I finally got sober, ever so often, once in 3 months or 4 months, some visiting American would bring a couple of speaker tapes. This was before CDs and Zoom and all this stuff was invented. I got sober BC, before computers. And these tapes were made by some guy called Glenn Kay. I said, who the heck is this Glenn Kay? He's some kind of, celebrity guy who tapes all these great speakers all over the world. So I hunted him down when I came to the USA, and I was so happy that I finally got to meet Glenn and be friends with him. And that's where we are. So we have a number of people at this meeting that have less than a year of sobriety. So I'll try and give a really simple AA qualification. I'm old school. I'm the kind where I got a sponsor and he basically kicked my butt until I did what was in the book. And then I got sober. Um, if you haven't figured out by now from my accent, I was born in Bombay, India. And I did most of my drinking over there and other parts of the world. I've actually never had a drink of alcohol in the USA, although I've lived here more than 25 years. So grew up in Bombay, middle class family. My parents were both dental surgeons. Um, Mixed background. My father's side of the family was staunchly Catholic, Christian, and my mother's side of the family was very strongly Hindu. These were all big believers. Um, However, alcohol was liberally used in our house. My dad graduated from Liverpool University and my mom from NYU, and they both decided to go back to India to practice dentistry and teach in dental college. And so my earliest recollections as a child was Friday night, Saturday nights. There'd be a whole bunch of doctors and dentists over at our house. They'd have a couple of drinks. There'd be a little dancing, there'd be some singing around the piano, then they'd have dinner and dessert, and then they'd go home. It wasn't even 11 o'clock. You know, that's a funny sight, to listen to a bunch of Indian guys singing Scottish and Irish songs around a piano with an Indian accent, but that's a story for another day. And now these were not like the parties I attended. There were no fisticuffs. There was no vomiting. Nobody went home with the wrong spouse. Nobody lost their car keys. The cops were never called. But as a child growing up, I said, oh, this is what adults do to have fun. They have a couple of drinks and they have a nice evening. Printed. The other thing was because of the socioeconomic educational background I grew up in, very liberal attitude towards alcohol. And my mom was actually born in the Portuguese part of India. My grandmother was famous for making homemade wine. So as a kid growing up, we'd be given the occasional glass of wine at dinner or on days and occasions of religious importance. And I got to tell you, it's great growing up in India because there's so many days of religious importance. You got the Hindus, the Muslims, the Christians, the Jews, the Buddhists, the Zoroastrians. You've got like every possible denomination under the sun. So there's tons of days for celebration. But that was my introduction. And the only real alcoholism that I saw growing up, what I now know to be alcoholism, was my grandmother's brother. This dude was really cool. He would show up early when we had a party at home. He always carried a little bag over his shoulder. Now he would come to the back room where we kids were hanging out. He'd tell us these incredible stories about how he almost wrecked his motorbike and how he got away from the cops. And, we were sitting there saying, wow, and he was generous. He'd give us money to go to the store to get him chips or cigarettes or peanuts. And, you know, I quickly figured out that if I loitered at the store long enough, he'd forget that he gave me money and give me money all over again. So I clearly started on my criminal career long before I started my alcoholic career. But the reason I bring this guy up is there were two things about him. One was he could be counted on to do something spectacular, do a headstand in the middle of the party, take a header into the cake, break a bottle of my dad's best scotch, accidentally feed the entree to the dogs, and then we wouldn't see this guy for another month. But he was kind and he was loving and he was generous and he had time for us kids. It was a lot of fun, man. And I wanted to be like him when I grew up. Needless to say, I got my wish. We had a lot in common. We both did a lot of drinking. We both worked in the airlines. We both were, I still am, bikers. We both ridden bikes and crashed bikes. His story didn't end the same as mine because the last time he went out for a bike ride, he crashed the bike and then he died. And the last time I went on a bike ride and crashed, I came out from the coma and 3 months later I got sober in AA. So uh, so that was what I knew about alcohol, and that's what I knew about alcoholism. And so, like I said, liberal background. There was no taboo. There was no big deal about it, and that's how I grew up. And at age 16, my father died unexpectedly. So that's a pretty momentous event in somebody's life. And a family council was held, and it was decided by the family that I needed to go after college and learn to be a dentist since we had a dental clinic and I should be a dentist. Now, I had no desire to spend the rest of my life looking into people's mouths. A couple of more interesting things one can do with people's mouths. But, you know, when you're 16 years old and you're a slave to the system, you bloody well do what they tell you to do. And my mom and my grandmother were running the roost. I actually wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to teach history and I wanted to be a travel agent, but I went off to college. And, you know, within a week, I met other disgruntled kids like me who didn't want to be there and who didn't want to study that. I didn't want to study all those, you know, science and physics and biology. I still can't figure out what dissecting a frog has to do with extracting somebody's tooth, but, you know, who knows? People smarter than me have those answers. So I quickly found this group of guys, and within a week, we had a MO down stat. Monday to Friday, Monday to Thursday, we'd make plans for the weekend because any alcoholic knows the weekend starts on Thursday evening, you know. And Thursday to Sunday, we'd get completely wrecked. We'd put whatever we could into our systems, alcohol, drugs, whatever, it didn't matter. And every Monday morning, same story. We'd get together on the basketball court. And by piecing together everyone's blackouts, we'd figure out what happened over the weekend. And for some reason, apparently I was the guy who could drink the most, drive the straightest, talk the most, you know, believable stories that other people's parents would accept. And I wore that as a badge of honor. Wow, I can really drink. I had no idea this was an early sign of potent alcoholism. But listen, college was great. If anybody here has never been to college, I strongly recommend it. It was a fantastic experience. I never actually got graduated. You know, after 3 years of this nonsense, I got kicked out of college. Uh, Apparently, somebody ratted me out that I was selling um, unapproved, non-curricular substances on campus. So I was given the choice of getting my butt out of college or having charges pressed. So I copped my first resentment. Who the heck do they think they are? And I left. And then I followed my dreams. Sorry, I'm not at home and at my brother's house in Pennsylvania, so I'm a little fidgety. I'll try and settle down. And, you know, I went off to college, and now here's where things changed. And I know there are a lot of new people in this meeting, but thank God we get to speak at AA meetings because I remember it clear as day, and it brings back my experiences to me when I get to share them. The first thing that changed when I started working, I got a job at Bombay Airport, and the first thing that changed was my frequency. I went from being a weekend warrior to a daily drinker. Now, my model for drinking was my father. He would come home from the clinic at 8 o'clock in the evening and he'd pour a small drink and then read the morning paper. So no one had to disturb him at that time. And at 8:30 in the evening, he'd pour a second small drink and come to the dining table. We eat later in India. So that's it. 2 drinks a day, guy. And when we had parties at home, the guy would have one. One day I asked him why. He said, I may have to drop somebody home. So one is enough. Responsible drinking. So that was my model. And now that I was a working adult, I decided that I would do that and became a daily drinker. That was the first change. The second change was quantity. Slowly, imperceptibly, the 2 drinks became 3, 4, half a bottle, out of control drinking. The third thing that changed was finances. Because now I'm spending money every day, so there's less money in the pocket. The fourth thing that changed was my relationship. Because at that time I was engaged to be married to my high school sweetheart. Getting married young is kind of encouraged in India. And, she was a fiery Anglo-Indian of Irish descent. And when are we getting married, honey? And I kept saying, next year, honey. And I pulled that along for about 10 years. And, honey would get really pissed about that. Once occasionally expected to show up with flowers and chocolates and take out to dinner, and so that would lead to a lot of fights. And then I discovered these 2 magical properties that alcohol has. The first is temporary deafness. Her mouth would be moving, but I couldn't hear anything. And the second would be temporary amnesia because the next morning I didn't remember. And next thing that changed was work. Because now I started going to work really hungover from the excessive drinking. And now I started to make mistakes at work. Like I said, I worked in the airlines. I was a cargo supervisor. And in cargo, we also handle baggage. And I got to tell you, at 6 o'clock in the morning, dreary, red-eyed, head pounding, you see a bag coming down the conveyor belt and you're trying to read what's on the label. You don't know whether it says Vladivostok or whether it says Vancouver, and you'd be lucky if that bag lands up in Tennessee. So if anyone at this meeting has ever had a bag lost on Swissair, Transworld Airlines, Pan Am, Delta, Kuwait Airways, Ethiopian, Gulf Air, it was either me or one of my drunken buddies. So I'm making public amends. And now when I travel, all I take is carry-on bags. Whatever I need, I buy when I get there. Now, bosses don't like this kind of stuff. And they start giving you these little love letters which says, get lost, go work for somebody else, which is why there were so many airlines in my career. Finally, I just changed the whole thing. And I was shooting pool one night with 2 buddies of mine that are film producers. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, we all thought it would be a brilliant idea for me to quit my career in the airlines and go work for them and do film production. What do I know about film production? Jack. What did I think I knew about film production at 2 a.m.? Einstein. So I called my boss. I told him where he could shove his job. And the next morning I showed up in the film business. It's probably one of the best things that happened because it accelerated my alcoholism extremely, extremely fast. The next thing that got affected was my health. I was now 26 years old and I had my first enlarged liver. I remember how shocked I was when my doctor told me my liver was enlarged. I said, how can that be? I only drink Bacardi. And the doctor laughed. She said, your liver doesn't care what you drink. It's enlarged. Stop drinking. So I'm very proud to report to this group of sober alcoholics that I was able to stay completely bone dry for 2 months. But I was only able to do that with the help of this weed that we get very liberally in India. And yeah, I smoked pot for 2 months, and that's how I stayed off the booze. And then patted myself on the back and started drinking again. And then 2 years later, 10th of December 1989, I was involved in a horrific motorcycle accident. And, it really wasn't my fault. I was going straight and the road turned left and I just kept going straight. I went over a cliff, 20 feet. I didn't have my helmet on. 7 days later, I came out of a coma in the hospital. I had 36 stitches in my head, 8 compressed vertebrae in my neck and my back. My neck was in a collar, my back was in a brace, and there was this whole inquisition committee sitting at the foot of my bed. My mom, the director, the camera guy, and they said, "Yo, what happened?" Now, I don't know if any of you alcoholics can identify with me, but when I've done something wrong and someone asks me what happened, my first instinct is to lie and to try and tell a believable story and watch their faces very carefully. And if I see they are buying it, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Now remember, this happened in India. And the cow is holy in India and is revered. So when they said what happened, I said, there was this cow crossing the road. And I swerved to avoid the cows. I saved the cow, but I had the accident. And you can get away with that story in India. Oh, okay, no worries. But I was full of shame and remorse and guilt. That wasn't the way I was raised. I wasn't supposed to be out cavorting till all hours and drinking and drugging. I was supposed to be working. And I felt so restless and irritable and discontented with what I had done that I called the doctors and I took a discharge against medical advice, left the hospital, walked into the nearest bar, had a couple of drinks, rented another motorcycle, and rode back to the film unit I was at. Of course, I didn't need a helmet now because I had this whole huge bandage on my head. But those guys were not having any of my nonsense, and they sent me packing, flew me back to Bombay, and I spent the next 3 months of my life in bed, flat, doing round-the-clock drinking. Those are the worst, I would say, the last 2 years of my drinking. Every morning I would wake up years first, and before I opened my eyes, I would try to figure out from the sounds in the next room how I came home the night before. If I heard all those normal, everyday, breakfasty kind of sounds, plates and spoons and forks, I'd say, okay, I came home okay. I still don't know what happened, but I came home okay. But if I heard that cold, appalling, deadly silence, and I knew there were people in the next room waiting to question me, wow. All of a sudden I'd get reconnected with God. I digress, reconnected. So I told you my father died when I was 16. Unfortunately, when we buried my father, the day we buried my father, the religious person, the priest who did the religious ceremony actually molested me that night. And I was scarred. I dropped church. I dropped anything religious, except when I was in these kind of situations. And I'd say, oh my God, let there be money in my wallet. And, I'd pray foxhole prayers. There was never money in my wallet. Pieces of paper. I don't know if they were IOUs or job offers or the wrong number of some unfortunate woman had been harassing the night before. And then make a beeline for the front door. Throwing some answer over my shoulder, trying to avoid any intelligent question that demanded an honest answer. Swearing to myself as I left the house, I am never going to do this again. Only to be replaced by, what do I do about the shakes, man? Maybe I can smoke a joint, or I can't walk around public smoking a joint. It's illegal. It probably still is in India. Or maybe I'll have one beer, just one beer. And then by 6 o'clock in the evening, The same mind which swore sobriety at 6 in the morning will convince me, well, you've already had one beer at lunchtime to stop the shakes, so it's okay to have a couple after the races again. Thousands of promises, thousands of failures, and I saw no point in living, and I decided to kill myself, climbed up on the ledge to jump. The same brother whose house I'm living in Pennsylvania right now, to give you an indication of how badly my alcoholism affected the family, when I climbed up on the ledge, my brother's response was, and I quote, "Jump, you bastard, and put us out of our misery." So, what an alcoholic, you want me to jump? I'm not going to jump. I'm going to make your life more miserable. And today, I'm a guest at his house. He's 6 years younger than me. I mean, we've repaired everything thanks to the AA program. So that's what it was like, because page 58 says what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. So that's what it was like. That was my drunk love. What happened was Alcoholics Anonymous. I was 18 years old. I was reading a book called The Second Deadly Sin about a New York City cop who's in AA. And I'm reading this and, oh, wow, there's some place I can send my drunken buddies to. That was my first awareness of AA. Never went for a meeting, never thought I needed it. 4 years later, I was 22 years old, 6 o'clock in the morning. I'd just come off a night shift. I was on my third rum and water. And my grandmother was coming home from church or somewhere. And she said, "What are you, an alcoholic, drinking at 6 o'clock in the morning?" So I went into this long, convoluted explanation as to how people who work night shifts at airports need to have 2 or 3 drinks in the morning so they can sleep through the sounds of the traffic and the cows. And she wasn't having any of that. And she said, "You know what? You need to go and meet Uncle Tony and meet his friends who don't drink." So I told you about my grandmother's brother who died in the bike accident and who was my drinking hero. Her other brother was Uncle Tony. Now, Uncle Tony was this boring guy, man. He played the violin. He sang Ave Maria. Not that there's anything wrong with either of those activities, but I don't want to hang out with him and his friends who don't drink. I wanted to hang out with people who did drink, And I've just spent the whole night listening to Deep Purple or Led Zepp or AC/DC or something, and Ave Maria, for God's sake. But if you love your grandmother as much as I do, you have 2 or 3 drinks and off you go to your first AA meeting at age 22. This was 1984 in India. We had maybe about 100 AA meetings in the whole country. I was 22 and I'm 60 now. So everybody else was 60 plus. The first shocker was that the meeting was at a church. And I said, what the heck? Yeah, I still had all my resentments from the abuse in church. And then all these guys were talking about prayer and meditation and forgiving and letting it go and turning it. Dude, I'm just trying to meet a friendly girl on a Friday night. I'm 22 years old. What's all this prayer nonsense, man? And then they will make all kinds of stuff which didn't work for me. They said, don't drink and come to meetings. I said, dude, if I had the power to don't drink, why would I need to come to your wretched meetings? I just wouldn't drink. Well, put the plug in the jug, kid. I said, I do, but the plug keeps coming out every Friday night and I get wrecked again. So all these guys were throwing slogans around. That didn't work for me. Then there was another bunch of dudes who were like there were some missionaries. They had this book under their arm and they were saying, you need to start doing the steps before the vomit dries up. What steps? So they pointed out to these steps which are on the wall and I said, holy cow. This ain't for me. I'm in the wrong place. Step 1, admitted we are powerless over. I'm 22. I'm powerless over nothing. I'm like Muhammad Ali. I'm young, I'm pretty, and I can't be beat. So I don't need step 1. And nowhere my life is unmanageable. I'm 22. My girlfriend is a fashion model, flight attendant, Miss India. I got a 2-bedroom apartment. All the material stuff I want. I don't need step 1. Step 2 as God. I don't believe in God. That's out. Step 3 as God. That's out. Step 4. Nothing wrong with me. That's out. Step 5, no way I'm telling you clowns anything truthful about myself. Step 5's out. Nothing wrong with you. Bless you, Glenn. Nothing wrong with you. So step 6 and 7 are out. Step 8 and 9, you guys need some help with your program. Step 8, I have a long list of people I would like to harm, you know. And step 9, I have a longer list of people that owe me amends. The guy I gave my last $10 to in the bar, the guys that I called their wives and lied to them and covered for them and gave them alibis. Oh man, they all owe me alibis. Step 10 is out. I don't need that. There's nothing wrong with me. 11 has guard and that is out. 12. Okay, I'll try and come for your stupid meetings and see if it works. So here I am trying to work on one part of step 12 of a 12-step program. How do I expect that to work? So from 1984 to 1990, I spent 6 years going through 6 jobs and a broken engagement and a failed business and a destroyed career and an enlarged liver and a motorcycle accident who almost killed me and a fake suicide attempt. And then the change happened. The day after I had threatened to jump off the ledge, I went to my first AA meeting sober. And it was 8 o'clock in the morning, and it was one of the first hospital meetings in India. And this guy spoke about the illness, the disease of alcoholism. And he was like maybe about 80 years old, the late Horace H., may his soul rest in peace. The guy was 25, 30 years sober. And he said, alcoholism and illness. And he's saying, nobody in AA is telling you that, it's the doctors. He said, even in an AA book, it's a doctor who at the start of the book says this. Now that got my attention because my mom and dad were both medical professionals. My mom taught anatomy at medical school. As a kid, I would go to the anatomy lab to do my homework, you know, surrounded by floating heads and floating hands and formaldehyde. Pretty cool. But so that caught my attention. And he said, look, according to medical science, alcoholism is a twofold disease of mind and body. He said, the physical part is an allergy. He said a small percentage of people that drink, if they drink alcohol, the physical reaction is give me more. Doesn't happen to other people, only people that are alcoholic. Doesn't mean I'm going to finish a bottle of booze every time, but I will have that physical craving. I said, man, I can identify with that. I'm the guy who always said 2 drinks before dinner, darling. And darling saw plenty of dinners. I never stopped at 2 drinks. You know, and then he used the term allergy. I had absolutely no problem identifying with the word allergy. My younger sister lives in Vancouver. She's allergic to fish. If she eats fish, she breaks out in a rash. Doctor told her this when she was 15. I'm not going to tell you how old she is now, okay? But it's been over 40 years that she's not eaten fish. She does not need to go for meetings of Fish Eaters Anonymous. She's not saying the serenity prayer to stay away from fish. For those of you from New York, Vinny, she's not running around Fulton Fish Market trying to find people allergic to fish and fish step them into fish sobriety. Doctor told her she's allergic, she stopped. I was freaking told when I was 22, alcohol doesn't agree with me. Nah, what do you guys know? I'll show you there's nothing wrong with me. But when Horace talked about allergy, I said, man, if she's got an allergy to fish and my allergy is a craving, I got it. I'm in. And he said, if this was only a problem of an allergic reaction, that would be fine. We could probably invent some medication or something. And he's saying, but the other part of the illness is mental. He said the main problem for the alcoholics is in the mind. There is an obsession that somehow, someday, I'm going to beat the game. That is insane. After all my thousands of failures of attempts to control, all my thousands of failures of attempts to stop. Like I said, I went to my first meeting in 1984 and I got sober in 1990. In those 6 years, there were, was there 500, 300, at least 300 Monday mornings 300 Monday mornings I swore I'm never going to have a weekend like this. Always failed. And it always got worse. I said, wow, definitely I have no mental or physical power over alcohol. And then we talked about unmanageability, you know, and he said, look, unmanageability does not mean that you're broke and unemployed and single and living on your grandmother's couch, all of which was me at age 28. The unmanageability that Alcoholics Anonymous is talking about is the emotional unmanageability which leads to the mental obsession. And my first sponsor took me through step one, where he said on page 52 of the big book, there are 8 simple questions. Are you having trouble with personal relationships? Heck, I'm 28 years old. I'm broke. I'm unemployed. I'm single. I've got stitches in my head, collars on my neck. I'm sleeping on my grandmother's couch. I have no personal relationship with anybody. Everybody hates me. My family, the neighbors, the public at large, the people I worked for, I can't control my emotional nature. I wake up angry, full of self-pity and fear. I'm a prey to misery and depression, and the only way to fix that is to drink more. I can't make a living. I can't stay sober long enough to remain employed long enough. I'm full of fear. I'm unhappy. And I can't seem to be of help to me or anybody else. And yeah, I'm all of those things. And then he said to me that if you are all of those things, it's contributing to your mental state. And the mental state before you relapse is a state which Dr. Silkworth in the big book says is restless, irritable, and discontented. RID. I said, wow, how do I change that? He said, you don't have the power to change that. The only thing you'll have to do is to believe or be willing to believe in a power greater than yourself. So I went into this whole long story about how I was sexually abused, and he wasn't having any of it. I said, well, my father's side is Christian, my mother's side is Hindu, and depending which grandmother I'm visiting, I'm assured that the other religion is the wrong kind. Wasn't having any of it. He said, look, A is about 2 things. It's about booze, and it's about God. The booze is going to kill you. It may not kill you right now. It's going to kill you socially. You'll lose all your friends. It's going to kill you spiritually. You're going to continue to lie and cheat and swindle and rob and connive. It's going to kill you physically. Your liver and other body parts are going to start getting worse. It's going to kill you financially. You'll be scraping the bottom of the barrel. And then eventually, if you're lucky, you'll actually die. But in your case, Roy, you're probably going to have a long, lingering death. Wow. This is what I do. He's saying the only option we have is God. So he said, well, you don't have to believe in either of your grandparents' concepts of God. Your own concept, however insufficient, is enough. I said, what does that mean? He said, do you have any friends left? So I said, yeah. He said, what's so great about your friends? I said, well, they always bail me out. Then they lend me money. They find me jobs. They hook me up. They forgive all my crap. He said, you know what? Write down all those qualities. He said, if by some accident there's actually a God in the universe, wouldn't you like God to have those qualities? I said, yeah, man. Page 47 of the big book. When therefore, Roy, we speak to you of God, we mean your own concept of God. I got to tell you, folks, I have never had any problem with my concept of anything. As long as it's my concept. I said, this is cool, man. So I have my concept of God. And step 2 was done. I had my last drink on the 22nd of April, and this was the 23rd of April when I'm having this talk with the guy who became my first sponsor immediately after the meeting. The meeting ended at 8:30 in the night. We did step 1 and we did step 2 in the first 10 minutes. And he said, okay, so are you willing to believe in your concept of God? I said, I am. He said, great, you've done step 2. He said, fine, let's do step 3. I said, now? He said, yeah. I said, how? He said, like this. And he knelt down. Now, you know what we're like, right? After the meetings, we go out with our coffee and cigarettes, and then we gossip about the speaker and we dissect him. That guy, So all these guys were milling around and this jackass knelt down over there and I felt really bad. I felt embarrassed. So I knelt down next to him and he said, repeat after me. If there is a God, please keep me sober today. I did that. I said, get up. He said, if you're still sober when you get home tonight, you say, if there is a God, thank you. I said, and? He said, you keep doing that until either you drink again or till you come to believe. Right now, you're willing to believe. So every morning, wake up. If there's a God, please keep me sober. Every night, if there's a God, thank you. I said, cool. Now what? Now I do the 90 meters. He said, that ain't in the big book. But what you need to do right now is the fourth step. I said, now? I'm not even 24 hours sober. I had my last drink at 11 o'clock last night. He said, I don't care. He said, if you don't start to find out, get down to the causes and conditions of your alcoholism at once, step 3 can have little permanent effect. You will drink again. You'll be one of those guys who are just part of the AA shuffle. 1, 2, 3, shuffle out the door. Or the AA waltzers, depending which side of the street you want to come from. So I said, oh my God, but I've heard that people who do the fourth step, they get like, they start, he said, what nonsense? He said, you jackass. Now my sponsor was a cross between Attila the Hun and Genghis Khan. He was this guy who sat behind me at an AA meeting. You know, if I walked in late, he'd look at his watch. If the speaker was speaking and I turned to look somewhere else, I get a whack on the back of my head. I don't know if they make sponsors like that anymore. I love the guy, you know. And God forbid I used profanity in the meeting. Oh my God, he would kill me. He said, you show me one word of profanity in the big book and then you can use it in the meeting. So this guy said, look, you have already done most of your fourth step. I said, when? He said, in the bar. He said, the fourth step is about 4 things. It's about anger, fear, sexual misconduct, and harms done to others. I said, when did I do that, man? He said, you go to the bar, you have 2 or 3 drinks, and then all your resentments come out. My boss, my wife. I said, oh, you're so right. He said, you have 2 or 3 more drinks, and then all your fears come out. Oh my God, will I get past the police checkpoint on my way home? What am I going to tell my girlfriend about not having a paycheck? I said, you're so right, man. He said, 2 or 3 more drinks and your attempted sexual misconduct begins. Fortunately, most of the women can move faster than you, so they save themselves from a boring evening. See, the only thing you did not talk about in the bar was the harms done to others. The grandmother who stayed up till 2 or 3 in the morning, wondering whether her eldest grandson would come home or be dead. The long list of employers who paid me a full week's paycheck, 40 hours of work. I gave them only half pay. Half measures did avail me something. I got a full paycheck. I mean, I would go to the airport, I would grab a file, and I'd be walking from one end to the other Bombay airport pretending to look for a lost bag or a lost child or a lost cow, just working off my hangover. Lunchtime was liquid lunch, and I'd spend the last hour on the phone making plans for the evening. Yeah, I heard those employers. Countless taxi drivers got into cabs with not enough cab fare in my pocket, passed out. I knew that, the guy would search my wallet, find no money. He'd take the couple of bucks that I had and throw me out on the street. But I've already reached home. And once he drove off, then all I have to do is go in. I had just 2 or 3 of my general events. The members of the general public, every time I got behind the wheel of a car, got on a motorcycle while under the influence, I put innocent lives at risk. The people who lived in my apartment building, children studying for exams, and I'm blasting rock music at 2 a.m. Yeah. Fourth step. Sat down, I wrote it out, and when I was done, I met with him. And this is old school AA. So, we weren't doing it on Excel sheets on the computer, notebook, pen and paper, black and white. And he sat and he went through my whole fourth step. And on a separate sheet of paper, he was making notes. And he was making faces and he was making sound. Oh, ooh, oh my God. These comments are very disconcerting. I'm sitting on the other side of the living room and what the heck is going on? And when he was done, he handed me the sheet of paper. And on one side was all the defects he had pulled out of my fourth step, dishonesty, laziness, grandiosity, manipulation, just to name a few. And on the other side was all the amends. And he said, okay, now let's do step 7. Here's your 6th step. He's saying, do you want to keep any of these defects? I said, yeah, I don't mind hanging on to a little lust, and some laziness is okay, and maybe some manipulation. So he said, okay, for the ones you won't let go of, your 6-step prayer is, if there is a God, please make me willing. Now let's go to step 7. What about the rest of the stuff? God can take those. Fine. If there's a God, please take my defects. So now my morning prayer became, if there's a God, please keep me sober and please take away the defects I'm willing to have removed. Flip the page over, looked at all my list of amends. Which of these amends can you make right now? I said, well, I can go home, make amends to my 2 dogs whom I've neglected sometimes, make amends to the cigarette vendor across the street, make amends to the neighbor and their kids. They said, okay, then you do that tonight. And which of these amends will you have to make later? I said, my grandmother's now in Australia, my brother and sister are in the US, some other close family members are in Singapore and in England, and I'll have to save money to buy the ticket to go and make those direct amends wherever possible. And he said, good, stop smoking, start saying, Attila the Hun, how do you tell a newcomer 4 months sober, stop smoking and start saving? He didn't care. He said, you got money to smoke? Go and pay your amends first before you bloody make somebody else rich. That's all your amends money you're burning up. Hated the guy. I mean, I love him. He's 46 years sober now. But he said, which of these amends are you not sure? I told you I worked at the airport, and I told you I worked in cargo, and I haven't always been an honest, upright citizen. And some of those amends could have possibly affected my freedom. And he said, well, the big book says consultation with others is very important before you make amends. And others are not just your family members, but also your lawyer and your chartered accountant and your God of your understanding. So some of those amends had to be prayed over, the ones that could have cost my freedom, and I'm happy to say I was able to do those too. And which of these amends can you never make? I said, I don't know. He said, all those women that you damage their relationships by monkeying around with them, you can't go up to their husbands and say, hey, you know what, I'm really sorry. That's gone. All you got to do is change your behavior, your sex ideal as from the 4th step. And I was done. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He said, now you start living. You start making these amends. Step 10, you just be aware during the day, your belly button barometer, when you're doing something wrong, when you're lying, when you're being arrogant, when you're being selfish. You're doing it, Roy. You're sober now. You're not under the influence. You got to quickly make an inventory, change that behavior right away when you come to the meeting in the evening. This is 1991, 1990. No cell phones. Most people in India didn't even have landline phones. The waiting list to get a landline was 7 years. So we had 1 meeting a day. You missed the meeting, that was it. So that was my 10th step. The 11th step, straight out of the book, did the inventory at night, asked myself the 10 questions from page 86, and in the morning when I wake up, I make my plans for the day. Then we came to the 12th step. I love the 12th step. And the 12th step segues directly into what it's like now. So I got sober, and we had no big books in India. So there were 100 meetings. Each meeting had a big book. So if you want to read the book, you have to come early to the meeting, help the secretary set up the meeting, and then he would let you read the book. And when the meeting started, they put the book on the table, and all of us would come in. Oh, the book would stay sober. A lot of us went out drinking. A few members did have their own personal copies. And when I was 1 year sober, my sister sent me a big book from San Francisco. That's where she lived, as my 1 year present. And my aunt in Melbourne, Australia, sent me some tapes of a couple of old timers sharing their journey through the steps. And that completely changed my life, And it's been such a wonderful experience to be able to take people along the journey of recovery. I don't really like the word sponsor. I haven't found it in the first 164 pages of the big book. But I just tell people, look, I'm just someone that's recovered from alcoholism. I'd be really happy to walk with you through the steps. And after that, we are done. When you're done with the 12 steps, we are walking shoulder to shoulder. Yes, I do have a little more experience staying sober, so you can call me and we can mutually do some 10-step stuff. And I've had such a blast. I was 3 years sober. By the way, I got my job back in the film company. And I was 3 years sober. We were shooting a project for UNICEF on the state of primary education in India in 1993. 6 months on the road. In 6 months, I passed through only 2 towns that had an AA meeting. 1993, still no cell phone, still no internet. I didn't drink. I had my big book with me. And every day I would use the OC, the original computer. I would write a letter to somebody in my home group. That was my meeting for the day. Every village we stopped in, once the crew got ready with their shooting, I'd be walking around the village just randomly 12-stepping people and telling them my story, whether they were alcoholic or not. I bought a whole bunch of literature from the intergroup in different languages. I left pamphlets in every village. I don't know if anyone got sober in those 6 months, but I stayed sober. When I was 5 years sober, God gave me an opportunity. Oh, God, sorry. Let me just share with how I came to believe. And I was 7 or 8 months sober. Yeah, I was about 6 months sober. And my worst enemy was dying in hospital of cancer. And had I been drinking, I'd have thrown a block party. But he was married to somebody in my family. So I went there and, I was sitting in the hospital. And this guy was moaning and groaning. So I said, if there is a God, you can make this man well. If not, take away the pain. The next morning, this guy woke up pain-free. Day 2, pain-free. Day 3, pain-free. That night he went to sleep, didn't wake up. Whoo! If there is a God did that for my worst enemy, I dropped the word if from my prayers that day. There is a God. I'm not sure if God is Christian or Hindu or Muslim or Buddhist or Sikh or I don't know. I like to call myself a USB, a universal spiritual believer, because I just plug my flash drive into every belief system and I download what I need. And I'm pretty cool with that. Big Book tells me I don't need to explain my belief system to anyone as long as it makes sense to me. So I was 5 years sober. I got a chance to go to a Middle Eastern country. There was no AA over there. So I would either have to go to Dubai for meetings or Abu Dhabi for meetings. And then another guy came in and we started the first meeting in Sharjah, the Just for Today group. And every Tuesday night we'd call the U.S. Embassy. Hey, any U.S. warships in town? Sir, there's classified information. You don't realize there's sailors on that ship, man. And then Mark and I would make a sign, any friends of Bill W., and walk down to the port and we'd pick up sailors, take them to our meeting. These poor guys thought they were going for a meeting. 2 of us for the meeting. Spiritual experience. In 2002, Glenn, I was speaking at the Hicksville Group's 50th anniversary and I told the story. And a guy came up to me after the meeting, tears streaming down his face. He said, I'm one of the sailors you picked up, man. I had 3 months at that time and I have 7 years now. My freaking hair is standing. How does a Babu from Bombay meet some kid from Kalamazoo out in the deserts of the freaking Saudi Peninsula and then meet the same guy in Hicksville, Long Island? There's got to be some kind of God. And the next year I got an opportunity to move to the United States. I went to school, I studied. For 25 years, I worked professionally in the field, helping people like us, go to AA meetings and never come back to see people like me professionally. I was at Dr. Bob's house and I met this young lady there. She had got sober in Mexico. I had got sober in India. We met in Dr. Bob's house. We said, the gods of AA are smiling upon us. I've got 7 years. She's got 4 years. Let's get married. Neither of us had read page 119 of the 12 and 12 about boy and girl meeting on AA campus and being spiritually grounded before they start monkeying around. Anyway, we got married. It was a great marriage for about 12 years. We have a 19-year-old son who's not seen either of us drink. And at 12 years, we realized that we were spiritually on different grounds. And we decided that we would get divorced. And this is the beauty of Alcoholics Anonymous, because we applied the first tradition into our relationship. Our common welfare was our son. His upbringing depended on family unity. And so although we had agreed to divorce, we lived together in the same house for another 6 or 7 years. Separate bedrooms, of course, until he finished school. And then eventually we signed the divorce papers. It's very amicable. You know, we both have higher powers. They're called lawyers. Her higher power has more juice than mine. I just finished paying. No, I'm just kidding. We're really good friends. And about 4 years ago, 2006, I'm about to wind up. About 4 years ago, 2016, I walked into work and my boss said, I'm sorry, I can't afford you anymore. And I was director of one of the biggest outpatients in New York City. And oh my God, I'm 55 and I'm unemployed. How am I going to manage? And what's going to, whoa, step 3. Didn't you agree to abandon yourself utterly to him? Then this must be God's will. Because I was unemployed, a week later, I got a call from my mom who needed open heart surgery. I was the only unemployed person in the family who could go to India and hang out there for 3 months with her. Because I was unemployed, I saw what's happening in India in my field. And after prayer and meditation, I made a decision to go back to India and try and help people in the field of addiction just kind of have some really good rehabs, US style. So now I live in 2 countries. I spend 3 or 4 months in India. I come back, I spend a couple of weeks with my kid, I go back again. Such a great gift God has given me. We get to live 2 lifetimes in one life. The drinking lifetime and the sober lifetime. I'm so grateful to the first 100 members. Because when they figured out how this was done, they put it down in a book. They sent that book all over the world. 50 million copies, 77 languages, 190 countries, 2.5 million people attending meetings in 125,000 meetings. Pre-COVID, I don't know what the number is now, probably more. I am so grateful that I was given this opportunity to get my life back. I want to thank Glenn for giving me the opportunity to speak, and I want to thank the Lunch Bunch for listening so patiently. Thank you.